Okay.
Can we please clap, everybody? How did it feel to be here again? Great. Wonderful to have you, Kennedy. Wonderful. I'm going to speak from our Hebrews passage this morning. The book of Hebrews is a slightly unusual one for the New Testament. It's really aimed at a Jewish readership, and it's talking really about how Jesus fulfills the role of the priests in the Old Testament, and particularly the high priest. And our passage this morning is picking up on three aspects of that I would like to talk about, which I think is very relevant for us. 2 or 3 weeks ago, I was talking about the tension between, on the one hand, the faith that we have, and on the other hand, the kind of messiness of life, and how we interact between the two, and how difficult that is. And today's passage has got three different kind of sentences in it, which I think are relevant to carry on that theme. And the first one is in the third line of the opening paragraph there. It says, the high priest is able to deal gently with the ignorant and wayward. Now this word deal gently is actually it's the only place it's mentioned in the New Testament. And it's a Greek word. The Stoics used it. It's a word that kind of is in between being really, really annoyed with somebody and not really caring at all. And it's kind of in between that bit where you're trying to kind of cajole people along gently, kind of keep going, keep moving. It's a kind of, you're involved, but you're not heavy-handed. And it captures, now people get a lot of understanding of the Old Testament as being a very heavy-handed God, and it's all comparison between the God of the Old Testament, fire and thunder, and a very gentle Jesus in the New Testament. And it's a bit of an artificial comparison between the two. But this lovely word, deal gently, captures, I really believe, the way that Jesus is with us, because he deals gently with the ignorant and the wayward. The ignorant, people who do stuff just without realizing they're doing it. I was thinking of the early service, and this is not an ironclad rule, but on the whole, older people tend to be nicer than younger people. Now, it's not a hard and fast generalization, and I know that. There are lots of exceptions to that. But there is something about going through the experience of life and realizing as you go through life how you should or shouldn't behave, and picking up the way that you come across and the way that you may inadvertently hurt or offend others. And as we go through life, we pick that up. But there's still lots of things that we do that we're ignorant of, and so there is this real gentleness. The sins that we do we're not aware of, that God forgives us those. Gentle with it. And then the wayward, those who know they're doing wrong, but want to kind of get back on the right track again. They want to get back on the right track again. In the Old Testament, these sacrifices were made for the people of the year, and it was a very customary, great release for everybody, except for people, it says in Numbers, who committed a sin with the high hand. The sin with the high hand. People who really deliberately did stuff that was wrong. There was no forgiveness for them. Now, this is different now, but that was how it was. So but this is this wonderful image of people who are wayward, who want to get back on track. So we start our service every Sunday with the confession. And it's a way of acknowledging the way that we've been wayward during the week. We're trying to kind of get back on track again. And Jesus has this role with us. He continues it as the high priest did then. He deals gently with it. If there's stuff that you feel bad about, stuff that you still feel guilty about, maybe after decades, I know this from pastoral work, sometimes people carry guilt for decades about stuff they've done or not. They should have done something, they never stepped up and did it. We have forgiveness for that. Our Lord deals gently with us in that context. So the messiness of life is very much allowed for. Secondly, if you turn over the page, got a couple of quite stunning sentences which give the commentator the heebie-jeebies sometimes. The opening one is, in the days of his flesh, Jesus offered up prayers and supplications with loud cries and tears to the one who was able to save him from death. A tremendous summary in many ways of the experience of the Garden of Gethsemane, of Jesus weeping and crying and asking God to take this cup away from him. And I think for many of us who have been in places of real desperation, there is that real sense of, I can relate to this. I can relate to this. That I've been tired, with cries and tears. I've said many prayers through tears and sobbing sometimes. And to know the kind of harrowing, gutting experience that brings us. I met one of our dads and toddlers' dads, and one of the previous ones, for coffee earlier this week, and he does business management, he's a business consultant, goes to companies and groups and tries to help them get back on track. And he says, Paul, he said, so much of it is really just about human nature. They know what they should be doing, they just can't get around to doing it. And it's just human nature. This stuff is kind of in there, clogging stuff up, stopping things happening. And this wonderful picture of the high priest as being somebody who really identifies with us in that stuff. The high priest is the Jesus who identifies with us in our weakness, in the ways that we let things down. We can't be the version of ourselves that we would like to be. And it happens again and again. And we think there's no hope. All these things are there. Are we weeping for our people that we love who are really in a bad way? Or you see this train crash coming down the track and we're saying, God, please intervene here. All that's going on in our world. I mean, the awful tragedy down in the South of England was that wonderful, lovely MP who was killed in a church, stabbed to death. It's awful. Harrowing at the moment, what goes on. And I can't even bear to look at the news sometimes, So this sense of the kind of prayers that we pray in the early hours of the night, when all seems lost, And we worry about our parents, we worry about our children, we worry about our finances, about our health, we worry about our faith, we worry about our church, we worry about the future, we worry about the past, whatever it is. That harrowing prayer, the prayer that Jesus has prayed himself in some fashion. You know what that harrowing prayer looks like. When it digs deep into us and it comes up from our bellies and our guts and it almost kind of tears part of our soul as we try to pray these prayers. And then the final sentence I just want to kind of pick up on really is the next sentence. Now, although he was a son, he learned obedience through what he suffered. He learned obedience through what he suffered. And having been made perfect, he became the source of eternal salvation. So this is what gets the commentators all tied up in knots. And I don't really want to get involved too much in all of that. But there is this sense. So, for example, yesterday, Willie and I were in the hall yesterday morning, and Ina was busy in the kitchen making all sorts of stuff. The hall was packed to the gunners with dads and their wee kids. All right? Reopening the dads and toddlers after almost 18 months. And it was just great to see a whole bunch of new dads, freshly minted dads coming in, living off of caffeine and opened eyes, you know what I mean? And they're just doing their best, trying to do their thing, And it was great. It was a great morning. But, as I was looking at these beautiful children, almost, a beautiful bunch of kids, and all just from 6 months up to maybe about 3 or 4. And looking at the dads, most of them in the kind of late 20s, maybe early to mid-30s, and thinking of all that's still ahead for all of them, I think when your kids are still young and you're a parent, you think you've got all these hopes and you're on your game and it's all happening, you know what I mean? But there is a sense in which these are things that you grow into life. You think you've got life sorted out, but you haven't. And then there's Willie and I, the kind of old wizened dads that are kind of hanging out there in the corner and trying to pass on our wisdom and all that kind of thing, Not really, But there is this sense in which we learn life as we go through it. You make the way by walking it. Perfection, obedience comes as we live that out. And that was the same for Jesus as it is for everybody else. Jesus didn't kind of appear on the earth as this kind of perfect person. He kind of floated 2 feet above the ground. You know what I mean? He really lived, he developed as a person. He went through the struggles of life. He cried to God. He was weak. He felt things were falling apart sometimes. And he learned obedience through what he suffered. And he was made perfect. I was just reading Viktor Frankl's book this morning, Man in Search of Meaning. There are some books it's good to come back to every now and again. And Viktor Frankl, as many of you will know, was a psychiatrist who was in Auschwitz for about 3 or 4 years and survived that. One of very few people who survived his batch. And he reflects on his time there. And in the passage I was reading this morning, he was talking about it was often not the physically robust men who survived. It was, again, you can't generalize with this, but there was often people who had a deep inner life, a deep, rich inner life. They were able in some fashion to live through the hell that they were all living in. And there were things that Viktor Frankl himself learned about himself that he would never have learned any other way other than through what he suffered. And for him, it was part of the point of writing this book is to reflect on, through the suffering, what did we learn about the meaning of life and the purpose of what we're here for. It's an incredibly profound book that has such credibility because of what he suffered. Because of what he suffered. And that is true for Jesus as well. And it is true for us as well. I'm going to go on a limb here, and I'm going to say that I think getting old is a form of suffering. It is a very rich experience. It is a wonderful experience, but there is a dimension, and particularly once you are 80 plus, in which life is increasingly tough as your physical strength begins to wane. And it can be very rich, and it can be very full. And you meet old people doing all sorts of things. It is incredible. But given the fact that we have, coming up next year, about 6 or 7 people in our congregation who are 90 plus, and a whole cohort who are over 80, this is real for our church. And through what, and I see it in my own parents who are both in their mid-80s now, through what old age brings in those latter seasons of your life, verses like this can have real resonance for you, that there is a profundity that you learn through that process, which you can learn no other way. And I haven't a Scooby about. And that is something those of us who are anxious about getting old, who are a bit younger, need to grasp this, that old age has its own fruits. It has its own blessings, but they can be hard won. But just like Jesus, it is something we only learn by going through them. And he is our high priest who identifies fully with us and fully with God. And that is why they fought so hard in the early years to get these doctrines right about the nature of Jesus. He was fully human and fully divine. And we can't work all that out, but both these things are true. And that is something I will certainly fight for until my dying breath, because this means he is our high priest. He has been where we sit and intercedes for us on our behalf. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.